This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited Podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited Podcast. On this episode, we have a guest that appreciates every aspect of the hustle that it takes to win a fantasy football league. You have heard him on Fantasy Football Hustle Podcast. You've seen him on or heard him on SiriusXM, and he's now a writer and podcaster with Fantasy Points. It's Brian Drake. Welcome in, my friend.
Hey, thank you so much. What a great opening, by the way. And you mentioned that I can really respect the hustle of winning a fantasy championship. I more so am impressed with fantasy creators and their backgrounds and their graphics and their intros, and yours are top notch. The Fantasy Football Unlimited website is out of control. It looks great. So, I'm impressed with everything you're doing over here, Kev, for the industry and the commissioners and the home leagues. I once coined myself the hero of the home league, but I think I got to give that mantra up to you because you're really going above and beyond for folks out there. So thank you so much for having me here. This is really cool because you've had so many of the biggest and best people in the industry on this, and to share my story and some little nuggets about myself on here is really cool. And I hope people enjoy, the conversation for the next hour.
Well, hey, I appreciate all those kind words, and it's it's an honor to have you on. I love meeting people, especially within this fantasy football industry. So many great people with fantastic stories, and you yourself certainly have a great background and interest and drive and grind within this industry. So we'd love to dive in and obviously learn more about your background. So take me back to when it began, when it comes to your passion for sports.
Yeah, so I grew up in a house where my father was not a sports fan. I love my father to death. I maybe he'll listen to this. My mom comments on every, anytime a stream goes live on Facebook, my account's connected, my mom will reply into it. But my parents were not sports fans really at all. So I just kind of found this interest in sports that was sort of on my own. I guess my grandfather was a little bit of a sports fan, and I would just read the newspaper, the sports page every day as a kid. That's sort of how I learned about or fell in love with journalism, first of all, which is what I went to school for. And then, I live in a college town here in Syracuse, New York. So you're born and bred Syracuse basketball. There's 10 minutes we were okay at football, but let's be honest, it's a basketball town first and foremost. So yeah, my first love growing up was college basketball in the Big East. And those days were amazing. If you've never seen the 30 for 30 Requiem for the Big East, I suggest you go do it. I showed it to my 11-year-old, and I cry every time I watch it. Every single time I watch it, I cry. I cry as a Syracuse fan. I cry for the death of the Big East that I knew, and just a little bit of your childhood going away. But that's really what got me going. And then I became a Philadelphia Eagles fan growing up because I hated Phil Simms. All my buddies here in New York were Phil Simms Giants fans, and I go, who's the anti-Phil Simms? And it was Randall Cunningham. Nice. I loved Cunningham, loved Buddy Ryan. The team stunk, but I didn't care about that. And I was been a long-suffering Eagles fan up until we got the Super Bowl a few years back. And I'm so happy I got to share that with my wife, and my children were very small, but I cried like a baby when, that Hail Mary to Gronk felt incomplete. And I've got a picture of me and my kids on the couch, and I got tears rolling down my face. So that's the great thing about sports. And now sharing it with my son, he's playing fantasy. He's got a team that's 9-1, by the way,
nice.
Which is ridiculous. He should be here on the podcast, not me. But I love it. Being able to share my love of sports now as I've grown up, with my wife and daughter and son.
I love that. And again, when it comes to like that childhood, the nostalgia, you watching a Big East documentary and getting emotional, I can relate to all that stuff. I remember when Griffey came back to Seattle in a Reds uniform and played in an interleague game. Yeah, the whole place was crying. You got players and teams that you just remember so many great memories as a kid. It's hard not to get emotional. And obviously Super Bowls do that too. So I love that for you. I love that for you and your son too. I've picked up on some of the, some of your tweets out there on social media, kind of sharing that excitement, seeing him kind of get into fantasy and really experience that. That's got to be a fun thing for you.
Yeah, and he took his first loss really well this week. I mean, he kind of got it handed to him. You know, we had Jalen Hurts on bye, and he drafted Jalen Hurts in the first round. You want to talk about a draft? This kid it's his first ever draft. I'm not telling him who to take. He's going against other kind of kids and some guys I know in the industry. They got their children in it, and he goes first round. He goes, I want to take Jalen Hurts. He had like the 6th or 7th pick. I go ahead, go have fun. This is what fantasy football in a home league is about. He took Jalen Hurts in the first round, came back around. He's like, what should I do here? I go, well, most people like to make sure they got a running back at some point. He goes, all right. And he took Derrick Henry. So he starts this draft, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, and starts 9-0. So, folks, there's ways to win in any fantasy draft. But, and I found I can put out tweets with the most ridiculous, nerdy data. And I'll plug Fantasy Points data here if I can. You know, it'll get like eight likes. I'll put out a picture of my son and talk about that, and people gravitate towards it, and it goes crazy. And it really shows in social media, in this community that we're building here in fantasy football, that, you know, there's a place for everything, but the human element, that's what really connects with people, is guys like you and I, like, we can relate. If somebody sits there, oh, hey, my kid's playing and I'm sharing the experience, because only one person at the end of the year is going to win your league, you know, hoist your trophy, cash the check, but it's the camaraderie of the league. It's building that love of fantasy football. And that's what's, you know, really driving the engagement I've found with a lot of my fantasy content lately online.
That's awesome. Yeah, my daughter's 11 as well. She played fantasy for the first time last year, and she did really well. It's funny, we were trying to get into a public league at the same time.
Yeah.
So we went on ESPN. We kept on hitting, you know, a join. It took us 5 tries to get into the same league. Wow. Every time I clicked and didn't get in the right league, I withdrew. But she evidently went into all those leagues, so she ended up playing in 5 leagues. So it was so much fun. And then this year she's playing in the Ian Fish Bowl, right? The Scott Fish Jr. essentially. And so she's playing against Scott Fish's son. She's playing against Liz Loza's son. And actually I'm in that league too, because they needed a couple adults.
Sure.
So there's, you know, me and a bunch of 10 and 11-year-olds. I'm in first place, but I'm fading. I took a bad beat from Ian Fish just, you know, a couple weeks ago by like, you know, half a point. But then my daughter she's second in points, and she's in second to last place. So she's learning, you know, that fantasy football frustration too. So full package.
Those fantasy defenses, they'll get you out there, folks.
I love it. So when did you discover fantasy football? When did you start playing?
I started playing fantasy, I want to say maybe around 2004 or so, 3 or 4, somewhere around there. I graduated college in 2003. Shout out SUNY Oswego, me and Steve Levy. And
nice.
Then, my buddies and I started a league, which still to this day exists. And I am the commissioner. I am not the commissioner of the year, you know, as someone else on this podcast may be, but I am, you know, I'm the commissioner. I love putting it together because it keeps guys together. It keeps bringing people back, and at times when they probably wouldn't, because, you know, life just gets in the way. But yeah, we started back then. I think it was an 8-team league, and I was bad. I didn't know how to draft. My friends will still probably tell you I don't know how to draft or do any of that, but
of course,
it's grown over the years, and that's my favorite thing about fantasy football, is the fact that I can get those 11 other guys together every single year. You know, the Saturday of Labor Day weekend, we draft in person and we have a blast doing it, and everybody shows up. Hey, you know, cross your fingers. Thank the Lord that everybody can still show up. And we've had some extenuating circumstances. We had a guy draft from the U.S. Open a year ago. We had a guy draft from jail. You know, we had a guy who was in Afghanistan and was in the league. Like, we've had a lot of stuff go on, but we've kept it all together, knock on wood, and the alcoholic haze is rolling strong in year 18.
I love it. That's awesome. So those early days of playing, do you remember, you know, people's content that you'd follow, or analysts out there that you really found their content to be, you know, exactly what you needed back in the day?
It's funny because he's now my boss, and it's John Hansen at,
nice.
You know, Fantasy Points now, is his site prior to that. But the guru was someone who he spoke to me because he wasn't like a film guy and he wasn't overly a stat nerd. He had a personality, and he could kind of connect with you on a level that I liked, as it was an intelligent football conversation. And he wrote kind of the way he spoke, because I'm a big radio guy. I love listening to him. I mean, back then he did a show with Adam Kaplan on NFL radio, and then going to SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I loved Hansen. I loved his work, and I've probably subscribed to whatever site he's owned for. I mean, I still might pay for it, and I work there now. I don't know. I got to check with Joe Dolan, see if they need a refund.
That's awesome. So that home league you mentioned, that's your primary league? Is that the one that you think of when you think of playing fantasy?
The Hayes. Yep. I'm in second place right now. Doing well. I've only won one championship in this league. And down here in the man cave, where if you guys ever watch any of my podcasts, I spent an entire league winning on framing a LaShawn McCoy jersey. I mean, this is a monstrous frame there's like, letter box going around it, and there's like a plaque inside it. So really I won nothing for this league, but this thing hangs in the basement like the centerpiece.
I love
and
it.
if I ever win again, let's hope I spend a little less money on whatever it is. But yeah, I'm doing okay. We're in it. Trade deadline coming up. I might have to make a move or two, but that's my main league. I would say my number 2 league is the Kings Classic that I draft out in Canton at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm crapping the bed in the Scott Fish Bowl. Usually I'm a playoff team every year. I'm awful. So, good luck to everybody else in the Scott Fish Bowl. And then there's a zillion other leagues that I probably don't pay any attention to.
I love it. So with the home league, you have, is there a last place punishment you guys have, or is there a last place punishment that you really love that you'd love to integrate at some point?
We tried to find different rules to keep people engaged, because you would have issues, and every league's had it. If you're listening to this out there, trust me, you've seen it in your league. The last place guy dumps his 2 best players at the deadline to the first place team. And so what we do is, if you finish in last place in the regular season, you have to pay an additional $50 towards the food at the draft the next year. So it gives you some incentive to keep trying to play. Of course, there's still people say they'll make dumb trades because, I don't want to come in last place. I'm just trying to do something. But we do have a consolation bracket. We give away a little trophy with a toilet on it. So I think it says like you're the worst or something on there. I have won that once before. So we try to keep it fun, keep people involved to whatever extent, because guys in their mid 40s playing fantasy, you've got a job, you probably got a wife, you got multiple kids. It's busy out there. So some of these guys, the only way they keep up with each other is through the group text. And we don't even use the message board anymore on Yahoo. They could just get rid of those things. Does anybody use it in any league anymore? It's all just group
I don't
text.
think so. Yeah, for sure. Now, when it comes to settings and formats, do you have a preferred setting or format?
I can't get these guys to change for the life of me. I've been banging the table, like a Brad Evans, Jake Seeley, these kind of guys. Get rid of kickers. I want to get rid of the kicker. We don't even have an IR spot in this league.
Oh, wow.
We added one for COVID, and that was it. The guy had to be listed out with COVID. It's the only way you can put him on the list. But magically now nobody gets COVID in the NFL. So, we haven't used that in a few years. But the league is my favorite setup because I created the league. So I got to crowbar this in. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, flex, and then kicker defense. I'd be fine, Kev, getting rid of the kicker and the defense. And I'm a guy who writes a defensive streamers article for Fantasy Points. I could get rid of them and I'd never miss them again. Add another flex spot. And we have 6 bench spots, which might be a lot, but it's a fun league. It's competitive. There's always kind of somebody on the waiver wire. There's always trades going down. So it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I like the larger benches, especially in a league like that. It is true. It's hard to mess with a home league that's been around, right? When it comes to certain settings. I did successfully get rid of the kicker a few years ago, which was nice. We still got those defenses in there, but you're right. No, it is true. It's hard to mess with those, people been playing for a long time. They don't want any change. People don't like change. But I can respect your attempts. Hopefully it works out for you.
Especially if they see you as, oh, you're the fantasy guy that does a podcast and, maybe something, or they want to keep it, because let's be honest, the kickers, it's total luck. You can have people that predict kickers or have to project them every single week. It's all BS. Let's be honest. You can't project kickers in fantasy football. Like I had, who's my kicker? I think it's Dustin Hopkins, and he had a great week for me. That guy kicked the game winner for the Browns. But you could have, if your kicker scores like 16 points against an opponent and they score 3, I mean, that's massive. It's tough to overcome something like that.
It's totally true. That's why I got rid of kickers, because it's just too. The way you feel when you lose to a kicker that scores 20 points. I didn't want to feel that, so I got rid of it.
Oh, you're a smarter man than I am.
I love it. So growing up, you always had an interest in getting into broadcasting. Again, like Syracuse. I mean, talk about like the mecca of broadcast journalism, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, out of anybody in the fantasy industry, you've got the best voice when it comes to like just broadcasting. I've always thought it whenever I listen to you. It's like, man, that guy was made for this. So did you feel growing up like you were like, hey, that's my thing?
I thought I had a cool name, and then some other guy became a rapper with the last name Drake. But I'm older than he is. I've heard that before. Thank you with the voice thing. I've never thought it in my life. I've never thought my voice was good. People don't like their own voice when they hear it back. Like I'm still the one dork that wears these huge headphones, so I feel like I'm on the radio, I guess, instead of earbuds like a normal person. But yeah, I loved radio. I loved journalism growing up. I loved good writing, and that's why I wanted to go to Syracuse so badly, is because the Newhouse School is just world renowned. That's where everybody in sports went. Tirico, Marty Glickman, Bob Costas, you name it, everybody went to Syracuse. Problem is, Syracuse is expensive. My father's a truck mechanic, right? My mom's a stay-at-home mom. Long story short, my best friend and I both achieved this thing called the Syracuse Challenge, where if you graduate from a Syracuse City high school with over 1,000 on your SATs and an 85 average all 4 years of high school, you're guaranteed admission to Syracuse and you're guaranteed aid. Okay, well, Syracuse at the time was, I don't know, $50,000 a year to go there.
Wow.
And I go to orientation. Me and my father, we eating lunch on the floor of the then Carrier Dome. Afterwards, we go up, we tour the campus, go into financial aid. They go, Mr. Drake, this is what it'll cost your son to go to Syracuse University for 4 years. It's $125,000. He looks at me, he goes, don't sign that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, this is my dream. Like, I've always wanted to go to Syracuse. He goes, you'll never pay that off. He goes, you'll be stuck with that your whole life. And my dad, who, he's a frugal man, but he's smart. And I don't know what clicked in me, whatever. I couldn't do it. And my friend, he ended up going to Syracuse, and he tragically ended up passing away in a car accident. So I went through all his stuff. He had the $150,000 bill to Syracuse that he still owed. I don't know how people get out from under that. I paid my student loans off 20 years ago at a state school. Yeah. So that's how I ended up not going there. But, it doesn't change my love of radio. I love Howard Stern. I love listening to sports on the radio. So, yeah, anytime I can hear really good radio people, really good podcasters. And that was why it was such a dream to get onto Sirius too. Like that was just for me. Oh yeah. The greatest thing I've ever done was getting a show on SiriusXM. That's when I really felt like I made it. Like I've interviewed some really cool people in the industry, but when I was like, wow, like I'm doing a show, and I was doing a show at first with my buddy Andrew Erickson, and then I had to do it by myself. That's brutal, doing a podcast by yourself for 2 hours. So shout out to anybody who can do that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome to be able to do that for sure, especially given your background and a passion for it. So when did you first start creating content for fantasy sports, fantasy football?
I believe it was 2017. Yeah, it was probably the same year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. So I was probably new to Twitter, and I was just following random people, trying to get that edge and I never call it X. It's always Twitter. And
for sure.
So I'm following this guy, Ryan Hallam, And Ryan owned or operated a site called Fighting Chance Fantasy. Puts out a tweet. He's like, hey, we need somebody last minute for a fantasy draft. Steve Gardner from USA Today dropped out of the draft. Like he couldn't make it. Something happened. So I just total luck. I'm sitting on my couch. I see that tweet instantly and I respond. I'm like, I'll do it. This guy thought I was a content creator. So he sends me the link to the draft. I go, I do the draft. Afterwards, he's like, yeah, just do a little write-up or something. Okay. I sent him a little write-up of the draft. He goes, yeah, who do you work for? I go, what are you talking about? I go, I don't know. I'm a beer salesman. It's like, no, who do you write for in fantasy? I don't. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, I thought you were a fantasy guy. So he goes, come write for me. So I started working for Fighting Chance Fantasy with Ryan Hallam, Steve Rappin, the greatest guys in fantasy. And Steve's now gotten out of the industry. Ryan has been working for a Fantasy Alarm for a number of years. But that site, Fighting Chance, and I've kind of taken over some things there in the few years after they stepped away, has launched so many careers for really a small site that there's no money in it. We're never going to pay anyone. I don't make any money from it. None of the other guys make any money from it. But I mean, there's guys who've written for Fighting Chance like Kevin Tompkins, Dwayne McFarland, Britt Flynn, who's on there now, Corbin Young, the legendary fantasy Taz, Jim Day, who, is going through a health issue himself right now. A lot of really great people have come through this site. So I got to get my start and cut my teeth with Fighting Chance. And this is what I'll tell anybody. And you can still come right for Fighting Chance. Hit me up, slide in the DMs at Drake Fantasy. They go, write about whatever you want. You want to write about women's WNBA, write about it. You want to write props, write about it. You want to write horse racing, write about it. We got a guy doing fantasy NASCAR over there right now. If you can get good at a niche, you'll find work in this industry. Trust me on that. And that is really what somebody's looking for from a big site. There's a million guys who do general fantasy content. If you can become the guy or girl at one specific niche, they look at it and they go, okay, now we got a market here. You got almost like a product in essence. That's like my friend, Dwayne had with his utilization report, and he took that and grew it. And now Dwayne's one of the biggest guys in the industry. God bless him. So that would be my advice to anybody out there. Kind of just focus in on something you like doing, like Matt Harmon, reception perception. There's guys who have that one niche. Go find that niche.
That's awesome. Great advice. Now, when it comes to the fantasy football hustle, where did that come from? When did that start? And how did you? Obviously, you said Dwayne worked with Fighting Chance. Tell me about Fantasy Hustle and where that began.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to do a podcast because I love radio. I love podcasting. That was kind of getting in vogue, and I'm listening to these guys back at like Blog Talk Radio and, Bob Harris and the Paul Charchian and these old school guys who really were doing podcasts before they were even podcasts. And I know Hanson was doing one back in the day. So I told the guys at Fighting Chance, hey, I want to do a podcast. And they go, great, have at it, kid. So I bought a new MacBook. I bought a microphone and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do? I want to interview somebody, talk about fantasy every week. They're like, I don't know, just find people to talk to, find somebody on Twitter. So I'm on Twitter. No, I have no followers. I have like 8 people that follow me. I see this guy out there. He's got no followers, but he's tweeting all these great stats out all the time, sliding his DMs. Hey, buddy, I'm doing this podcast. You want to be my first guest? He's like, yeah, dude, let's do it. The guy was Dwayne McFarland. We do the show. It was fun. And then after the show, Ryan Hallam listens to it. He goes, I go, okay, cool. Who's going to be the next guest? Like, who should I find next? He goes, no. He goes, that's the show. He goes, you and that guy. He goes, get him back. He goes, that guy's smart. And I quickly realized, hitch your wagon to really smart people and you can go places in this world. But so Dwayne and I, built this friendship and we built the hustle, as his writing career grew. It was phenomenal because he's so smart and he's so good and talented. And I'm so happy to see the levels he's brought it to now. But he started growing from Fighting Chance. He went on to a role at Football Guys, and from Football Guys to establish the run to PFF, and then PFF to Fantasy Life. So the hustle just kind of grew along with it. And when you have really smart people putting out good content, other people want to be a part of it. So we would get these amazing guests on the hustle. They didn't know that no one was listening to the show. They just thought because we were marketed well and we looked sharp, that was where I came in. It looked like a big time show and it sounded like a big time show. I went and found my buddy, John Gay, who is a big major market DJ in Detroit and New Orleans. And I go, hey, John, can you make some imaging for our podcast? So he did all the audio for the podcast, the openings and all that. I found my buddy, one of my fraternity brothers. He's Emmy Award winning creative director of the SNY, New York Mets TV station. I go, hey, man, can you make us like a video opening and all that? Made it for me for free. And so now all of a sudden when the hustle comes out, people are like, whoa, this thing looks legit. And I would just promote the hell out of it because as you well know, if you're not promoting your own stuff, no one else is going to do it. You've got to be your own number one biggest fan out there and just promote the bejesus out of your product. If you believe it's big time and you talk it up like it's big time, other people will start to believe it's big time. And I think that's what helped us with the hustle. We did that show for 5 or 6 years until, just contractually, Dwayne went on to fantasy life and, we just couldn't really do it anymore because, he had things going on there. But yeah, if you're ever going to stop doing a podcast, it's because you made it. That's what we set out to do. Hey, let's go get jobs in fantasy. And lo and behold, that's what it did. So you never know if the hustle will come back around. I did it as a solo pod, basically all of 2022. So I still own it. We still have the rights to it. Dwayne and I still have it in our Twitter bios. So never say never if the hustle could come out of retirement and pop up in your podcast feed one day.
I love it. Well, it was obviously a great run, great podcast, and you're right. The imagery, the jingle, the host, and Dwayne. I mean, you guys were phenomenal. So it all obviously worked out well. So you're obviously doing some stuff with Fantasy Points now. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah. So after I had to kind of find my own way a year ago. I'm like, well, I really want to keep doing this and I want to do it somewhere. I just happened to make friends with Joe Dolan at the Fantasy Football Expo and the Kings Classic drafts, even before there was an expo. And I was in the Kings Classic. God knows why. You can have a million other guys besides me, but Brian Drake's in it. So I would go out there and I meet Joe and we just start talking about boozing and everything else that we like talking about. We kind of stay in touch, talk on Twitter. And I think he just kind of hits me up one day and he's like, hey man, like I'll do a podcast. He's like, you're doing it solo, right? I'm like, yeah. So he's like, why don't we do one together? I'm like, great. Let's do it. So we started doing the 2-point stance. It took us 11 years to figure out the title for the show, but we had a lot of fun with it. And I'm doing a defensive streamers article over there at Fantasy Points. And I try to make that my own. I know that, listen, is it the most glamorous thing in the world? Someone's just doing a defensive streamer article, but no. But you know what? Hey, if someone's paying you to write an article or big time site and people are going to read it, put some time into it. Put a little personality into it. And that's what I try to do, where I give people season long and some DFS takes about defensive streamers. And behind the scenes, I get to talk with Scott Barrett. I get to talk with Graham Barfield. And I did a show with John Hansen over the summer on YouTube. So those are all just amazing kind of bucket list things for me, as I just look at it as a guy in his basement, living his fantasy dreams, and we'll see where it goes. Hopefully I can keep building on it. And, my association with Fantasy Points, maybe that can just grow and grow and grow. And then I don't have to do a 9-to-5 regular gig out there. I can just do fantasy full time. That's the ultimate goal.
I love it. Now, you mentioned the expo. Obviously, we've enjoyed a lot about this community. Tell me about your experience with the expo and again, a little bit more about the Kings Classic draft.
The expo is the best. Let's be honest here. Drew Davenport from Football Guys and I text all year long about the expo, where we're going to go, where we're going to drink. Did we buy new clothes? Because let's be honest, if you've never been to the expo, folks, you got to have some good clothes. You got to have your T-shirt game going. I know you know all about that. With the outfits, you got to look good. So, the expo is great. I started going, whatever the first year of the Kings Classic draft. I went out there. I wasn't even actually in the draft. Fighting Chance was, and I said, I got to be at this. Everybody who's anybody in the industry is at this draft. I showed up and they let me be the auctioneer
Nice.
for the first one. So if you've never done a live auction, and I would tell you, live auctions are great. Live auctioneering sucks. Don't do that. That is brutal. You got to be a special kind of freak to be a auctioneer for a live draft. So I just started going, year after year. And then after my first outing at the expo, I was in the draft for Fighting Chance, and I've been in ever since. But the expo is the best. Just meeting people, growing your connections, people that you see online, maybe you see on TV. Marcus Grant's a friend of mine. Him and I were out doing debaucherous things at 5 a.m. I tell my kid when I see him on NFL Network, now I'm like, hey, there's Dad's friend. And I show him like a picture of him and I like hammered in the back of a minivan at 5 a.m, which we fit 85 people in Drew Davenport's minivan, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, you made so many good friends out there. And I think that helps grow your brand. And, when I got my second year on SiriusXM, I think part of it was because I was at the expo. I cornered the program director and I'm like, hey, are we doing this again? Like, I want to be on the air again. He's like, oh, yeah. Let's get the contract signed and blah, blah, blah. So anybody who can go to the expo, I would say, please go support Bob Lung and his venture out there. There's so many amazing things that you can do. My wife and kids want to go next year. She told me, she goes, this is the last time you're going alone. We're bringing the kids. And you can go do whatever you do, but we're going to go to the water park. We're going to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So yeah, my debauchery might be cut in half next year.
I love it. Yeah, hopefully they get that water park ready. Is that projected? I think it was, right?
I hope. I mean, they'll find some place to go during the day when I'm sleeping off 38 Miller Lights.
I love it. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll throw out some questions. You just let me know what first things come to mind.
All right.
What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of fantasy sports?
I love golf. Some days better than others, but maybe I just love buying golf equipment. That might be a better thing. Collecting cool golf equipment. I like golf, love beer, good craft beer. I'm an IPA guy, and Syracuse basketball and the Eagles. And of course, spending time with the kids. That's first and foremost. Focus on them, and because they grow up so fast, man. It's a blink of an eye, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, hey, this kid's gonna be in college tomorrow. He was just in diapers.
Absolutely. Who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
Oh, I love it. Hit me with the wrestling questions. You get Joey right on, and now me. We could talk wrestling the whole show. Favorite wrestler of all time, man. It might be a tie. I mean, God, there's so many, but for what The Rock did while I was in college, it was must-see TV with The Rock. I loved The Rock, and I loved Shawn Michaels for what he could do in ring, and the Rockers were my favorite tag team. When he kicked Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window, I cried. I've talked about crying way too much on this podcast. I remember that, and I showed it to my wife the other day on WWE Network. I'm like, hey, watch this. Like, this had a real big impact on me when I was a kid. She's like, you're a loser. Like, what am I doing with you? It's
That's
fake,
awesome.
right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I mean, yeah, The Rock was pretty sensational back in the day. Who do you choose between Hogan, Flair, or Sting?
Oh, look at you. Got the wrestling buddies up here too. You know what? We had cable as a kid, so I got to see all the WCW stuff Saturday nights and 6:05 Eastern. Give me Ric Flair, styling and profiling.
I love it.
There's a guy who's a mess. I can't wait till his stories finally really. I mean, he did a documentary, but boy, that guy there's just stories on him.
Yeah, what a wild life. Now you are the man with all the IPAs stashed at the expo, right? What is your favorite beverage of choice?
Yeah, I love a good IPA. I'm trying to drink less. I'm trying to drink less soda, less Red Bulls in the morning because basically these Red Bulls are expensive. So, but yeah, my favorites are IPAs. If I had to pick a favorite IPA at the moment, let's see. It's called Neon Rainbows from Brewery Omegang, which is in Cooperstown, New York, home of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Just a delicious, juicy IPA. So if you can ever get your hands on stuff from Omegang, go out of your way to try that.
That's awesome. And that's in my reference to the expo is that you basically kind of basically say, hey, bring some different beers from where you're coming from, and we'll all get together and share.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you did?
I have a massive cooler full, but then I realized like not everybody stays at the same hotel. So I have guys like just showing up like with handfuls of beers and they're getting thrown out of the bar. Like, you can't bring beers in here. And I still have some actually in my fridge. So shout out to everybody who met up and swapped some beers. That was really cool. Maybe next year we can be a little more organized with it, because that's a fun thing. It's, hey, where are you from? What's the great beer that you're proud of from your hometown? Bring it out. Let me try it. It's just more ways to connect and make friends. That's what fantasy is all about.
Love it. That's right. Who's your favorite Syracuse Orangemen basketball player of all time?
Oh boy. Favorite Syracuse basketball player of all time. It's got to be Jerry McNamara for winning the title in 2003. And then Carmelo leaves and he's got to scratch and claw and put the team on his back to just get them to the tournament year after year. And, the great run that he had through the Big East tournament, maybe that was 04, 05, whatever it was. And the 6 overtime game with, who'd they beat in that game? Connecticut, I think it was. Whoever they beat in that game. But yeah, it's got to be G-Mac, man. That guy was the heart and soul of Syracuse basketball.
Nice. How about Syracuse Orangemen football?
It's funny. People think that I became an Eagles fan because of Donovan McNabb. This is a God's honest true story. I have season tickets to SU football. McNabb plays. His first game was actually on the road. He played at North Carolina. But when he's in the dome, Cunningham had just left the Eagles. I think like a year or so before that. I turned to my grandfather. After I see McNabb running around, I go, this guy would be great for the Eagles. He's like the next Cunningham. 1999 comes around, second pick in the draft or whatever he was. Boom, Donovan McNabb, the Philadelphia Eagles. But yeah, I'd have to say McNabb is my favorite Orange football player. It's probably the last time we were good.
I remember back in the day, Qadri Ismail, right? Didn't Rocket's brother play there? There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. We were all right back then when he played a little bit. And Syracuse would always like go to like the Fiesta Bowl and just get destroyed by some upper echelon team. But we were good for our little northeastern cluster of players that we could get. Now, I love it. Nobody wants to come here in the snow.
I love it. How about so is Cunningham your favorite Eagle of all time?
Cunningham and Brian Dawkins. I've got their jerseys autographed and framed right in front of me here. Cunningham was just electric, and Brian Dawkins. My wife actually has a Brian Dawkins jersey also. He's just one of those heart and soul guys. It's like G-Mac when you talk about the Syracuse basketball team. When the fan base can get behind him because they know this is a lunch pail guy who's just laying it all on the line. Those are the guys fan bases get behind. The kind of the prima donna receivers, the TOs of the world. They're cool while they're putting up points for you, but you don't see anybody wearing a TO jersey 20 years after he leaves Philadelphia. But there's Brian Dawkins jerseys everywhere.
No, I love it. I like, obviously Reggie White. I mean, Jerome Brown, that defense back in the day was pretty fantastic. How about what's your favorite expo event of the weekend? Like what's the event that you're looking forward to most at the Fantasy Football Expo?
Well, it's got to be the Kings Classic draft. And I love all the events about the boozing and meeting everybody. That's super fun. But going and competing in that draft, and this year I'm in the quote unquote A division, which is the Jim Brown division. I'm a game out of first place right now. So that's just so cool. When I sat down in that room, and the Kings Classic draft was in the Hall of Fame in a big room, and they had screens with your picture and your draft pick and the board, and SiriusXM was in there, and Ian Harditz and Jordan Fliegelman are calling the draft. And I looked around, I'm like, man, there's like, my buddy Jim Coventry and Bob Harris and Dave Richards and Jeff Manns is sitting next to me. I'm like, this is legit right here, man. I gotta take a selfie.
Yeah, that was a pretty spectacular event. I was the one that's running that draft board. I'm the one that actually put together all the images. Right, the next room over, the B group, let's call it that. They didn't have that custom. The one that Bob Lung was doing, they didn't have that custom input. So that was fun. It was an honor to be involved in that for sure.
And And you took a lot of shrapnel that you shouldn't have for how long it took to set up the draft. That was not on you with the draft order and all that. There was a lot of other shenanigans going on. People, they couldn't sit where they wanted to. They couldn't bring you the right number. The computer software got a little wonky.
Yeah.
So I want to publicly say it was not Kevin's fault that we started that draft 20 minutes late.
There was definitely some things I would have done a little bit differently, but yeah, no, there were some quirks that were a little bit out of my hand, but it was fun regardless. I mean, again, amazing people. I will say that auction, that next one, that was wild because you just can't keep up with an auction with inputting the data. So Dustin Ludke came and he saved my day. I mean, he came and was writing down all the names, and we got caught up and it worked. But that was different, doing the draft software with the auction. Corey Parsons was just a phenomenal auctioneer. But that was
a great job, much better than I did.
I love it. But I remember they got you on a radio spot right during the draft, right? Were you commenting while you were drafting?
Oh yeah, I had to make a pick. And it was funny. It was like my last pick. I'm just yelling out at the crowd. I'm like, who should I pick? And I think somebody's like, Josh Kelly. I'm like, great, give me Josh Kelly. And Curtis Patrick came up to me afterwards from RotoViz, and he goes, I was going to take Josh Kelly. He's like, I think he's going to have a legit role. And I ended up starting Kelly when Eckler went out for a few weeks. I mean, of course, he wasn't great, but, it turned out okay. But yeah, in those 14-team leagues with 3 flexes and 3 receivers, I mean, there's nothing. I'm doing my waiver wire right now for it. Forget about it. You could your grandmother's probably on the waiver wire at this point, and she's viable. There's nothing happening.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm sure. I'm happy that you have that experience. Again, what a group, and I'm sure that's definitely something that you're looking forward to get back to each year. Obviously, it's challenging. I'm sure competing in that league, but
I just want to win it. I lost in the finals last year of the Blanda division. I lost to Graham Barfield on literally the last drive of the fantasy season. A Pat Fryermuth reception cost me the Kings Classic championship belt. Every time I talk to Graham, I bring it up because he's a fantasy points writer as well. But good dude. I'm glad he got to win. Hopefully one day I'll get my belt. Maybe it'll be this year.
I love it. Now, name one like a strong connection that you made at the expo that really stands out to you.
I think it's my buddy Drew Davenport from Football Guys, the fantasy football lawyer. And Drew's a smart guy. He's building his following. I subscribe to his Patreon. I told him, I go, you owe me drinks at the expo every year because I'm paying this Patreon monthly for you. But Drew is great. We have a tremendous relationship. Talking to my buddies out there, Doug Orth, Jim Coventry, Mauricio Gutierrez, as I call him, the Matthew Berry of Mexico.
There you go.
He laughs it off every time. But if you guys don't know who Mauricio Gutierrez is, he's like the guy of fantasy football for the Spanish-speaking world. So Mexico, Spain, anywhere in South America, he's the guy. When you go to the NFL.com app and you switch your settings, you lose all the American guys, and it becomes him. So being able to call him a friend and drink with he and his bride out there is super cool. And there's a billion other guys and girls you get to meet. So it's a weekend that I wouldn't miss. I got to meet you out there. So look, and it got me here today. So love the expo, love Bob Long and all the hard work he puts into it.
Yeah, it's a special event, and Mauricio is definitely one of the people at that event that just has so much excitement and happiness. He's a wonderful guy. So you're right. I'm gonna adopt that Matthew Berry of Mexico. That's good.
Oh, yeah, that's how I got to talk to him. He was standing there. Just real quick, we're at that outdoor party on Friday night, and he's just kind of standing there by himself. And I'm looking at this guy, and me and Drew are standing there like, who the hell is this guy? And he's just like by himself. Like nobody's talking to Mauricio. He just literally just came there by himself. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? And he just comes over. He's like, hey, amigo, I'm Brian, I'm from NFL. And then we find out who the hell he is. I'm like, oh my God, like you're a legit dude. Like you should be up on stage giving a presentation here. And ever since then, we bonded over IPAs and we talk all the time. And every time I see him out there, we go have dinner and have some adult beverages. So it just goes to show you got to reach out, get out of your comfort zone, go introduce yourself to somebody new. you never know what door it might open for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, and his wife is wonderful too. So you're right. Can you name someone that you wish you had spent more time with connecting at the expo?
Oh man.
Like who's on your bucket list for 2024?
You know who I don't get to hang out with there a lot is Dwayne. When he's there, like I've only met Dwayne in person twice. I've done podcasts with him for 6 years. But he's so busy out there that we didn't even get to spend much time together this year. Some guys I didn't really get to meet. I don't know if I've ever had a good conversation with Joe Bryant of Football Guys. I know he loves meeting people at the expo. And just every year, whoever's out there. Dave Richard, I haven't really gotten to spend a lot of time talking to him. Howard Bender, I'd like to talk to a little more. But yeah, everybody's great. And just the more time you're out there, the better. And everybody's so down to earth, and it's the best. It's, my wife will realize that when she goes this year. She'll be like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then she'll go, I'm never coming again because it's just you and all your dorky fantasy friends.
I love it. Yeah, I'll see if my wife and daughter, have the interest to finally get out there this year too. We'll see. What's the last TV show that you binged?
That I binged. It's crazy in my house. It's all kid shows. It's either sports or kid shows. What did I binge? I like to try to watch my favorite. What did I just finish watching? So like the one day people go to bed early in my house and I can crack a beer and sit down and watch it. I finally caught up on all the Full Swing episodes on Netflix because I like golf, and Dark Side of the Ring. If you ever watch any of those shows, shout out to the Marty Jannetty episode. We're talking about the Rockers. Marty Jannetty has a Dark Side of the Ring episode and he's still alive. That shows you how messed up of a life Marty Jannetty has. Those shows are reserved for like the folklore of dead legendary wrestlers. Marty Jannetty is very much still alive and has his own crazy documentary. So go check that out.
Something. Yeah, that says something. Do you have a favorite show of all time?
Favorite show of all time. That's the secret of marriage. I'll let all the listeners in out there if they're wondering, like, how do I meet a woman, or a guy? You just find a person you can watch TV with, because my wife and I are cool with that. And we can find just really raunchy comedies that we enjoy watching together. My favorite show of all time. You know what show I love and like nobody either watches it is Big Mouth on Netflix. It's a cartoon like with Nick Kroll and a bunch of guys. It's super raunchy. It's about like middle schoolers, and it's like literally don't let your kids watch it. It should be like rated X, but it's so funny that's probably one of my favorite shows. I made sure I watched every episode of.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite all-time movie?
Shawshank. Love Shawshank. Love The Crow.
Ooh.
I have those movie posters actually in my basement down here too. When I worked at a movie theater as a kid, they had those. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take these. And the cat's out of the bag now. Sorry, Hoyt's Movie Theater. I'm the guy that stole those two movie posters. I'm framed here. The Crow one, I have the box set and of The Crow, and it's just a cool poster. It says "Believe in Angels," and it's just this like moonbeam coming down and Brandon Lee walking through it. But Shawshank, how do you go wrong with that? Tombstone's another one I'd put there on my Mount Rushmore movies.
I love, Shawshank's definitely an all-timer, but yeah, I would say that like Tombstone is definitely one of my all-time favorites. The Crow is definitely one of my all-time favorites back in the day. How about sports movies? Do you have a favorite sports movie?
Let's see. Favorite sports movie. As a kid, if you're my age and you grew up and you don't say The Sandlot, I mean, that's tough because that's such a great movie. We're talking about me crying a lot here. Cried at the end of Rudy. Still cry at the end of Rudy every time. Miracle, I think, is really, really well done. Favorite. We're trying to show these to our kids now as we go along. I would have to say The Sandlot. For me, because I played a lot of baseball as a kid, and that just brings back all the feels of you and your buddies at 12 years old.
That's good. Now, what would you choose between Field of Dreams, Bull Durham, or Major League?
Oh, Major League. And you want to hear a Major League story? I'm out. I might have been at the Expo, to be honest. And all of a sudden I get a message on my phone. It's from Time Warner or Verizon or whoever we have our TV through. And it goes, congratulations on your purchase of Major League. And I go, my son's home by himself. And like, that's a rated R movie. Well, have fun, kid. Enjoy it. Good luck. Yeah.
Oh, no way. That's
So
that's
he
fun.
just watched it himself.
Oh, that's a good one. Definitely one of my all-time favorites too. That's good. He was 10 at the time.
Yeah, I think he was 10 years old. They're
Hey,
swearing left and right, and they've
yeah,
got that cardboard figurine of the owner
yeah,
they're peeling off. I'm like, oh
yeah.
boy, I'm probably a bad dad for this, but do whatever you want, kid.
I love it. Now, do you guys have a favorite place to go on vacation?
We just did Disney a year or so ago. We love going to concerts as a family. So,
Okay.
we take the kids we took them to Philly a couple years ago, last year, and we saw OAR. Like, we're big in like OAR music. We love music as a family. It was OAR and Dispatch, and OAR opened the show. Dispatch was the second band, which was perfect because I'm there with two young kids. OAR plays for an hour, whatever it was. They say, all right, thanks, everybody. Good night. We leave. Literally, everyone else is still just coming into the Man in Philadelphia. And we're like, all right, we're out of here. Back to the hotel. It's still light outside.
Yeah.
So that's probably my favorite thing to do on vacation is take the kids somewhere to a fun concert. We went to LA for my 40th birthday, Dodgers game, and all the stuff out there. That was really cool. We stayed in Malibu. I got to see Coach Craig T. Nelson. I saw him at brunch.
I love it. That's great. No, you never know what you're gonna find on vacation. I love it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be weird. I just give him the head nod when I walk by. I'm like,
Respect. I like it. What's one thing you're just really deeply grateful for at this time?
having these great kids, great wife who's super supportive and doesn't care that I sit in my basement and write articles and podcast as long as I get everything else done. So, having the two kids, I'm very grateful for. And then on the fantasy side, just the opportunities that I've had and the chance to get to work at Fantasy Points with John and with Joe is awesome because listen, I'm no different than anybody else. There's a million guys and girls out there that want to do this and are probably smarter and better at it than I am. So they see the breaks that I've gotten, and maybe you make your own breaks. It's going to the expo. It's writing articles. It's promoting the crap out of them. And maybe you make your own luck that way. But I'm very fortunate to be a part of Fantasy Points.
That's awesome. Now, you have done a great job with establishing your presence within the fantasy community. Are there a few people that you want to, shout out that really just kind of made a huge impact on you during your journey in this industry?
Yeah, like I said,
mean,
Ryan.
You mentioned a lot of people already, but
yeah, Ryan Hallam and Steve Rappin. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Fighting Chance Fantasy. So I got to give all the credit in the world to them. Dwayne, no, there's no question about it. He's a mega star in this industry, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't getting to team with him and pick his brain every week of the fantasy football hustle. So I'm forever indebted to him, and guys like Bob Lung for allowing me to come out and hang at the expo, and I love those guys, and being with John and Joe and the Fantasy Points crew. So yeah, I'm very lucky, and my guy Andrew Erickson, I mentioned him, my PFF co-host. So there's just so many folks out there that have helped me along the way. And if you're ever going to make it in this industry, and I'm sure there's content creators that are listening to this pod, and if you're still listening 55 minutes in, God bless you. I love you folks, but it's building those relationships. That's what's going to get you to the next level and find you a job that actually pays. Who knew that they actually paid people to write articles in fantasy football? I thought that was just reserved for the select few, but no, that people actually do get paid to write articles out there.
That's awesome. It's true. Yeah, just got to keep grinding. Obviously, making connections. I can't recommend the expo enough. I mean, it's such a special event that Bob puts together. Growing connections, meeting people in real life. It's amazing how once upon a time most people had not met each other, right? And now you go back each year, and it's just like one big family. If you ride out there solo, you go out there with a group of people. No matter how you go about it, I mean, you're gonna feel like you're part of something because you are. It's a special event.
Yeah, and I've tried to open up more because listen, on social media, there's a lot of people who are clowns, and I'm older now. I'm in my mid-40s. I don't have time for. If you saw the amount of people I have muted on Twitter, it's ridiculous. But my feed, there's 4 people. I only see 4 tweets. But it's when I go to the expo, I'm trying to be more open-minded of like, let's actually meet people, see what they're all about, give people a chance. And maybe they don't like me. I'm sure I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and they find me annoying or obnoxious for whatever reason. So just, and that's like that in any walk of life. It's not just at the Fantasy Expo, but just wherever you are, being open-minded, being out, helping other people along, and just building up the industry like you're doing here with Fantasy Football Unlimited, man. The stuff you do is incredible. It looks sharp. It is sharp. And everybody should be listening to these shows. These are really, really good interviews you do.
I appreciate it. It's a pleasure. Again, I love this community. I love the game of fantasy football, just the way that it, it's impacted my life. So for so many years, the way we've been able to stay connected with people. I want people to have a great league experience, because I feel like that's the foundation.
Yes.
And I think it helps people stay connected. So I want people to do that. And I believe that the deeper you dive into content, the more you'll enjoy playing fantasy, and the more you enjoy playing fantasy, the more connected you'll be with these people and have fun. And in this world, I mean, we need more fun. We need more positivity. And I think fantasy does that. And so it's my pleasure to share fantasy football resources with people. And if I can find, have one person out there discover, a podcast or a creator or an analyst that they didn't know existed, and be impacted by them, then hey, that's what it's about.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job. And I love that niche angle that you've taken. It's you want to build the league experience, as you say. That's awesome, because I think that gets glossed over way too much nowadays, as everyone's talking about betting and props and DFS. And at the end of the day, fantasy football is still you and 10, 11 of your friends getting together in someone's garage on a weekend in the summer and drafting a team, and then the trades and the mocking each other and the punishments. That's what you remember. You might remember who won or a crazy pick. We always go back in my draft. We remember there was a time, if you put the sticker on the board, and this, commissioner of the year, you put the sticker on the board, that's your pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a guy in our league. He was sitting here, and at the draft, he's like, I need the backup running back for the Steelers. What's his name? He's like, Mendenhall, right? Mendenhall. He looks at the guy next to him. He goes, yeah. Mendenhall, Rashad Mendenhall. He goes up and goes, how come there's no sticker for Mendenhall? Mendenhall literally retired like 3 years before this. And everyone's just kind of looking around. He's like, just write it in. Write it in. Puts it on the board. Everyone dies laughing. He drafted Rashad Mendenhall. We take a picture of it, instantly tweet it out, tag Mendenhall. Mendenhall responds instantly. And he's like, whoa, better start training. Got to get in shape and all that. So like, we never forget that. That's what you're building, with Fantasy Football Unlimited, is the league experience. And I love it. That's, kudos to you.
Hey man, I love that story, because that's what it's all about. The fact that you can, for the rest of your guys' lives, joke around about Rashad Mendenhall, that draft pick. I love it. That's, hey, that's a good thing to cap it on. Obviously, is there anything else we haven't covered that you want to share before we close things out?
Oh man. No, it's just, I love trying to help other people get into the industry. And maybe I've done that where there's people behind the scenes, and I've tried to help get jobs and have pushed different directions. But if I can help anybody else out there, slide in at Drake Fantasy. If anyone out there is looking for more content, let me know. I'm also writing over at Sports Kita. I got to mention those guys. They're allowing me to write a couple of articles. I got to write one after we get off this podcast, by the way, a week. So they're trying to grow in the fantasy space. So I'm thankful for those guys taking a chance on me. But yeah, it's just fantasy's fun. At the end of the day, people getting fights on Twitter, and they're all angry about everything. It's fun. Who cares? At the end of the day, like it's fake football. We all love football. This is just another way to enjoy it. Imagine if we didn't have it. Like, nobody would care about football. You wouldn't even watch.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, fantasy is fun. This interview has been a ton of fun. I appreciate you coming on, Brian, and best of luck moving forward, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one. Good luck to everybody in the rest of your fantasy seasons.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited Podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.